Welcome back, everyone. Rabbenu Avraham ben Harambam on Parashat Bo. This is Rabbi Nathan Zaboulani learning with you the topic of Minhagim that eventually become into mitzvot for Am Yisrael. We see an example in this week's parasha, and we're going to see examples in which Rabbeinu Avraham points out this phenomenon in other parashiot, specifically back in Sefer Bereshit, in which an old-time minhag custom of the people, not even necessarily amongst Am Yisrael, had developed and become a mitzvah for us. How that happens and why that happens, we will explore today. So the pasuk we're going to be analyzing is regarding Bnei Israel's request to leave Egypt and Paro's response back to them. Paro, after Moshe says, hey, let us go, Paro says, you know what? I will give you the opportunity for the men to leave, because we're still operating under the guise as though we're leaving Egypt in order to serve Hashem, but we'll maybe come right back, right? And Paro says, you know what? You want to leave all Am Yisrael outside of Egypt to do what? To serve Hashem? No. Your men can go and serve Hashem. Ki otah atem mevakshim. This is what you want. Vaygaresh otam et pnei Paro. And Paro sends Moshe away after this debate that they have between themselves. And on this pasuk, ki ota atem mevakshim, Rabbeinu Avraham points out, ki halichat gevarim shehitarti ota, this leaving, right? This going out of the men that I'm permitting you to do, hi behetem ima she'atem mevakshim. This is, at the end of the day, what you want. This is ota atem mevakshim. Behag, the havodah, to serve Hashem on this holiday. Ki hataf anashim einam mitzuvim. Paro knows very well that the children and the women are not obligated in the command to serve Hashem, at least through these korbanot. And here is Rabbeinu Avraham's interesting point. It seems as though that this custom, this minhag, in which men were heavily involved in the ritualistic components and the women were less involved, right, in the ritualistic components, that has been a minhag for very long. In all societies, but in particular between the Jewish people. V'ish'ira hota haTorah, and the Torah kept it, this minhag, kakatuv, yera'eh kol zechurecha, in terms of coming to the Beit HaMikdash and bringing a korban and doing aliyah laregel, yera'eh kol zechurecha, the men should come. Now this is a command from the Torah in which seems to be very consistent with what Paro is understanding the people way before Matan Torah are acting and practicing. So Rabbeinu Avraham is pointing out here that it seems as though the minhag of general people, of our people, turned into a mitzvah when Hashem gave the Torah. In other words, God saw the minhag that we were keeping, right? And kept it that way because it worked, or because that's what he wanted. And that is the system that continued to be the case. And we see this in Rabbeinu Avraham's Perush in at least two other occasions, which I want to go over so that we'll better understand this idea, this approach. When Yaakov is dealing with Lavan, how much he's going to take when he exits that family business, he goes on all these different disturbing things that Lavan treated him with. And one particularly difficult pasuk is Gnufti Yom Ugnufti Laila. What does that mean? Gnufti Yom Ugnufti Laila. Rabbeinu Avraham explains that this goes back to the laws that have to do with watching someone else's or watching sheep or cattle, right? And the law would be in this case that if a ganav in the daytime were to come and steal the cattle that Yaakov is watching, then Yaakov would really be responsible for that. But if it was at the nighttime, so it's at the nighttime, it's not easy to see, it's more dangerous for whatever reason it may be, Yaakov should be exempt, right, based on the common law of the time, and not be obligated if something was stolen at nighttime. But here, Yaakov is complaining to Lavan and saying, you, Lavan, have not been fair to me all of these years, because if something was stolen in the daytime, you would treat that the same as though something was stolen at nighttime, and in the nighttime as the daytime. You wouldn't differentiate. You would hold me accountable in the nighttime just as though it was the daytime, even though I should really be exempt if something was stolen in the nighttime. And over here, Rabbeinu Avraham says, "Velo ti'er Yaakov alav shalom et zeh Yaakov is describing what the common minhag was of the time, bedin hashomer, based on what would be the law of someone who's watching over someone else's object. As we've seen through the explanation of these psukim. And he says not only regarding this, but also regarding the law of yibum. This is a mitzvah. We know it's a mitzvah of yibum, in which if a brother passes away without any children, it would be the responsibility of his brother to betroth that woman to have children from her. That was a minhag that they had from olden days, and it became a mitzvah. This law of shomer, which Yaakov is describing, very accurate to our halacha of shomer, seems to be something that was done then, and the Torah kind of gave it a stamp of approval and made it so. Vishira oto haTorah, and the Torah left it the way it was. And Rabbenu Harambam says, for sure, this was the case regarding other mitzvot as well. We're going to see another example right now. Last example I have for you, Vayomer Halilali me'asot zot. This is Yosef saying, God forbid, Has v'shalom, would I ever do such a thing? In what context? When Yosef discovers the gavia, the goblet, that is in the bag of his brother Binyamin. And he says, well, what's going to happen now? I have to take Binyamin now as an Ayaved. Yehuda stands up and says, no, don't take just him, take all of us. Yehuda's plan here obviously is that he would rather be all together with the brothers rather than leave Binyamin alone. And in that request, Paro says, I would never, I would never do something like that. Rather, the law, the rule is the person who has the goblet, who stole the object, he is going to be my aved, but you guys are innocent. I'm not going to take you hostage. I'm not going to take you as slaves. You go back to your father, right? Yosef rejects the request of Yehuda of all of them becoming slaves. Now, based on what law are we talking about? It seems as though this was the custom, this was the law amongst the nations and their proper actions. That a slave, that a thief that was caught would be sold into slavery to pay off the debts of what he had stolen. And it's possible that when Hashem gave us the Torah, He implemented this as a mitzvah for Am Yisrael. As Hashem had inspired the nations to act accordingly. So we're seeing a new element over here that Rabbenu Avraham is explaining these customs and laws that took place before the Torah as not just being regular man-made things, but rather inspired by Hashem to walk and to go in the proper ways. And the Goyim have this knowledge, this inspiration from Hashem, Am Yisrael, before the Torah. We have this somewhat of an understanding of this, right? But they were not commanded. But now we are commanded with the Torah. If a thief is caught and he does not have what to repay, he should be sold into slavery to pay it off. Rabbenu Avraham continues just on the specific topic. Why should that be the case? This stealing is something that's very common amongst slaves. But those who are free, why should they steal? And therefore, if you steal, which is an act of slaves, that's what a slave would do. He has nothing, he needs to survive, he would steal. But you're stealing and you're Ben Horin, you're doing an action which is something common amongst slaves. All right, now you're going to see how it feels. If you act like a slave, we might as well make you a slave if that's the way that you're going to act anyway. And from these 3 or 4 examples, we are seeing that Rabbeinu Avraham and Harambam understands that there is some culture, some minhag, some law, some society within the people before the Torah. And some of these laws were good. In fact, it seems that some of these laws that were practiced were inspired by Hashem. These were good laws, proper laws, and they pop up before the giving of the Torah in different locations that we mentioned. And once Hashem gives us the Torah, it's almost like He took what was already being done and gave it a stamp of approval and made it into a mitzvah because it's something that really worked. It's something that was effective. It's something that was proper in society. And these minhagim of the past, minhagim that were not limited to Am Yisrael, they developed into mitzvot specifically for Am Yisrael. Thank you very much for joining us on this learning and idea on Rabbenu Avraham ben Harambam on Parashat Bo. Please join us for Beshalach next week. Have a great day, everyone.